Liked it.
It was all right. It wasn't bad. We're live. Okay. All right, everybody. Welcome to the Data Center News Show. And I have some fabulous guests today. And I've got my co-host who I'll let everyone introduce themselves and then we'll get into it. We'll get into the news of the day. All right, Howie, go first, sir.
Hey guys, Howard Berry, Avis and Young. I run the global data center division over at Avis and Young. We do everything data center real estate related. So happy to be here as usual every week, and we have some great guests this week. Thanks,
yes,
Amy.
We do. And Bobby.
So Bobby Little with NTT Global Data Centers. Really at every intersection of real estate, technology, and investment, overseeing most of the Americas. Great to be here.
Awesome. Thanks for coming. And David?
My name is David Holub. I've been doing this for a little over 30 years in all kinds of capacities, but kind of most recently with, Prime and Cloud HQ and Colt. And about 6 months ago, I started my own firm called Kernel Data Centers.
Awesome. Very cool. Well, welcome to the show. This will be great. So the top story is DeepSeek. So, which I, came on the scene. Nobody knows what it means. And we're all trying to figure it out. But there have been a little headwinds, because obviously it's a Chinese company. So they started facing some of the same things that TikTok faced. And so it's been banned in several countries already. So Italy, the Australian government, U.S. government, Pentagon, and Congress, and some other people are not letting people use DeepSeek. The state of Texas, because I'm from Texas, y'all, so they always do that. They don't like China. What do we think? Where does this is this all much ado about nothing, or what do we think about DeepSeek?
Bob, you want to go first?
Yeah, I'd say, from our view, I kind of associate with that point, much ado about nothing, right? I mean, besides the market shock, whoever, held some shares there, may feel that, but from a, commercial perspective, really don't see it changing much. When we think about, the overall continuum of, the different use cases for AI, maybe there's some risk for, those kind of far out in the middle of nowhere types of developments that, are triggered to those use cases that, are low on the compute end. For most of us that are, have deeply entrenched in this game, we're still focused on, the same key markets, a few secondary, but our customers, our tenants are still focusing on the same things, which we all have way more of a pipeline than any of us can meet in the near term anyhow.
Yeah, I think I might, add a graph to all this, which is, no change in the slope of the line. No change in the vector and the direction, but, maybe a bit of a change in the slope. And I think that the slope had been, hyperbolic and, some sense of letting some of the air out of the bubble is actually probably healthy for the market. In what I do specifically now, which is primarily pre-construction work, I look at it in terms of, again, demand for powered land and approvable projects that are actually going to get done. And, we've always had a really, established slope in this line, if you will, for cloud computing. And then we've added this huge AI change that we're going to all need this incredible amount of infrastructure. And I've heard, smart people, and people that I've talked to about, really the future in a decade or more, talk about, we're going to have 15% of the grid power go towards data centers. And, I've had my doubts. I think, going from, 3% to 5% or 6% of the grid going towards data centers is already an absolutely, challenging goal. for all of us to meet and, extrapolating that out, 10 times or 5 more times has been a little wacky.
Yeah, great point, David. Not a hockey stick event for sure. Nothing's slowing the velocity of the growth of the data center industry at all from everything we're seeing. We just keep going. And it reminds me of, it's another Chinese company that's coming into the U.S. that has its challenges here with risk scenarios. So yeah, it reminds me of, and David, you might remember this, or even Bobby, you might know, China Mobile built a data center here in our local area and maybe paid double what it cost to build it, and they can't operate it. It sits vacant. It's an office building, and they're not allowed to operate their data center here in the U.S. So again, another Chinese business challenge.
Extremely familiar with that project in particular. Yes.
Yeah.
Interesting.
It's kind of sad. I mean, I'm not, anti-competitive. I think competition is good, and I think that, but there's also, I think, a significant issue here from what I've read, and I spend less time on the systems side than I did earlier in my career. But look, you can talk about, distributed computing or highly, computationally intensive, instances of computing. But I think the fact of the matter is that, we're going to see it one way or the other. And with regard to this particular instance, it seems like a lot of it has been derivative of other people's work. And I think the further you derive, this work from these large language models, the less actual, real, useful information you're getting. I don't want to offend everybody in AI, but it's to me, we're still seeing. I don't want to get in trouble here. A lot of word salad.
Okay, so data center 101, and then I'm not the only one because my audience loves the fact that I don't know crap about data centers. That's not true. I know a little bit, but I want to do a 101 question. Is a data center actually storing data, or is the data center using as compute power, or is it mostly both, or does it lean more one to the other? What is on the data center side? How are people using it? Is that a weird question?
It's a mix. Bobby, what do you got? You got a mix, right? Memory.
I can't answer, but I want to not dominate the conversation. Please go ahead.
Are we saying specific to? Are we still speaking towards DeepSeek or
No,
just in general. You gotta.
Oh yeah. No, yes. Certainly, there's a blend. We'd all like to know more about just the types of applications that our customers are deploying within their space, but usually as kind of guarded. But there tends to be a bit of a mix between compute, storage. Really just depending on the product that pairs with that availability zone.
Yes.
That hopefully, we're able to capture some of that demand, within those markets.
So I'm not an AI expert, but there's a couple things about this that sort of cross that boundary that are both very computationally intensive and, need what I would describe something akin to platform computing, where you have a whole bunch of computing resources that essentially are being used as one to solve a problem. That has a lot to do with what some of the demand for AI is coming to market, is to satisfy a very intensive computational need across a very large data set. It derives a model. That model does need to be stored, and then the inference side of it, to my rudimentary understanding, is what then queries this model and derives answers from it. So it's a little bit of both. But what we're seeing in a lot of the demand is, at this point, what we've been talking about is a lot of those, intensive computational resources being applied to building, AI models. I do believe that going forward, we're going to see a more distributed architecture that's going to be more latency sensitive and likely to produce more, let me see if I can put this in gross terms, fewer huge campuses, larger, which is what we're getting a lot of demand for right now, are huge data center campuses. I think, the next generation of stuff might be, closer to the market, closer to the urban markets, more latency sensitive, and more on the inference side, if you will.
So the latency effects, it's on the computational side, not the storage side. You store anywhere, right? Technically, or does it matter on the storage side versus the compute side, the latency effect of?
Again, you'll find me someone who knows a fair amount about this, but I don't like to get too far over my skis on systems that I've not been fully briefed on. But the point I'm getting at is it's a little bit of both. And you need to store these large models and you need to interact with them. Yeah. And the difference that I'm talking about has to do with latency. Okay. And what those interactions between these data sets look like. Yeah. And how sensitive they may or may not be to latency. In other words, you can ship, whatever, your petabytes of data out to the campus, have it apply its computational resources, build your model. It's stored somewhere. Mm-hmm. And then the inference engines reference it to derive results.
Yeah. So the edge data centers and the prevalence of edge data centers that are coming out now because of the latency issues, is that AI driven? Do y'all think it's AI driven, or is it just because we're getting more and more data, we need more storage?
It has to do with latency, just like David said. It's about connecting to the data as it comes in. As we have more, things that are connecting and our cars are soon our robots in our homes. Everything is going to need that information. We need connectability. We need it within a certain distance, a close distance.
Okay.
For low latency.
Right. Okay. What we can't solve is the speed of light. We're still constrained by the speed of light.
Yeah. We're getting there.
We're getting
there. We'll figure it out. The aliens will tell us.
Yeah.
They did. This wasn't one of the stories we're going to talk about, but they did figure out that 37 dimensions. They tried to, there's a news article talking about quantum mechanics and how many dimensions can light go into, and now there's apparently 37. In case you didn't know, they beat us by 34. We're 3D. They're apparently in 37.
I didn't even know that, Amy. That's pretty good.
I know. That's awesome. I don't know what that means. I don't know what that means to us when I read it, but there's, and who was in charge of counting the dimensions? That's what I want. Did they name them? I want to be the dimension namer. Can I be the dimension name? I don't know. The little things that I get jollies over.
It sounds very string theory to me.
Yeah, I know, right? Yeah. So let's talk about AMD. There was a story about AMD. And I honestly, look what I know. I didn't even know they were in the data center business, but they are. Apparently, they're applying chips to data centers too. They expected their revenues to double, which they expected their revenues to do a little bit more than double, but they only doubled. So they got a stock hit because they only doubled. So obviously, NVIDIA is in the data center game. AMD apparently is in the data center game. Who else? Is this much ado about nothing again? I mean, like, they doubled their revenues in data centers. Like, I'm curious.
Well, there's only so many NVIDIA H100s to go around, so there's room for everybody.
One of the things again, not a huge area of expertise here, but I know that these GPUs and the systems that they go into are extraordinarily expensive. And the biggest companies in this business have been looking for alternatives and investing in alternatives. And I think that's part of what you got out of the DeepSeek story
Right.
was that they were able to do this on lower cost processors
Mhm.
and fewer of them. Now, again, I without a great deal of expertise, I would question the actual quality of the result as well, because my understanding is again highly derivative of existing models that their model queried.
Right.
But the point being that there's a bunch of companies out there trying to lower the cost of this, and that should be in no way, shape, or form surprising.
Yeah, being a low cost provider. Yeah, and that makes sense. So as a data center gets built or the data centers are being, so say let's take the Elon Musk example, right? He came in and went to Memphis and he built this data center in record time or whatever, and stuck a bunch of NVIDIA chips in there. But Elon has money to burn. But when you're doing a normal data center development, I'm assuming that the technology that you're acquiring for that, unless you're co-locating and they're not your servers anyway, but if you're actually putting the servers in there, how long does that process take? Like, to understand what your servers, like, what does that look like, Bobby, from a time frame?
Yeah, I mean, we're still not at a place where we have this supply chain thing figured out. Lead times are still, 2 years, for some key critical equipment.
Yeah.
The servers are one thing, but we're thinking about the infrastructure topology there at the site, and many of these are coming from overseas as well. I mean, I don't know how you do that in under 12 months.
Yeah, I don't either. I don't know what he did. So in talking supply chain, the tariffs that are happening, what do we see as the impact? We had an interesting conversation earlier today on my other show, but it was around multifamily. But the concept was they have these bands. They only, like, it was $800 or less, and basically it could fly through customs or whatever. It was like a dollar value, right? So you had $800 or less, it could go through customs. Well, now they took that away. So now everything that's going to be in front of your chip that's coming over from, say, if it's China or Taiwan or South Korea, wherever it's coming from, is going to be in line with everybody's Temu order and Shine order and Amazon order that's coming in at the border. So now it's going to delay certain things. And I don't think anybody's got that part figured out yet. But that was the interesting conversation we had around tariffs. It wasn't so much, yes, the tariff, yes, it's going to cost and it's going to increase cost. It was the supply chain bottleneck that's going to happen because they took away the de minimis ban or whatever like that. I don't know if y'all heard anything about that yet.
I haven't heard anything. Or has it affected anything we're doing? Maybe it's too soon to tell for our industry because, to Bobby's point, everything's taken 2-3 years to get, and whatever's purchased already is already agreed to and coming. I don't know how that affects.
That's interesting.
Let me give a slightly different viewpoint and come at it from a different angle. It might be the same, get to the same place. Look, I think a lot of this stuff, needless to say, is kind of now the law of unintended consequences is rearing its ugly head. We've talked about the chips literally go all the way to the other end of the electrical diagram, right? So on one end, we've got the server and the chips. On the other end, you've got the utility, right? Mm-hmm. One of the biggest things holding up our work, and this is why I do what I do now, is utility interconnection. And the problem largely in utility interconnection is an overburdened queue with supply chain problems. Supply chain problems with high voltage gear, right? Now, even if you buy some of that high voltage gear from what you would think are name brand American companies, right? Turns out some of that stuff isn't necessarily made in America, or significant components that go into it are not made in America. And so And these are, when you start talking about, multi-year lead times that are holding up projects, these are very significant bottlenecks. And the short answer is we don't know what it's going to do to that yet, and it's already bad.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. So the power, in order to say you see a new land site, I think we were talked about this on one show, Howie. It's like 5 years or something crazy town before they can allocate power to that site. Is that still
3 or 4 years to get transformers or breakers to turn on substations right now for utility? And the other thing that tariffs are going to affect are energy costs.
Yeah, for sure.
So that's another cost effect of the industry that we're going to look at. So
it's because we get some of our power from Canada. So I guess I'm assuming that just goes to the northern parts of the U.S. And so if they can continue the tariffs from Canada, it's interesting. It's an interesting dynamic.
Solar panels, battery storage, material for building, wind turbines, you name it.
Yeah.
Whatever we're getting, like David said, from overseas, that's part of the construction process. Those things are built somewhere else for less expensive, and we're going to have to import them at a higher price.
And it's deceiving because they're labeled with American companies' names, right? I mean, that's the part, like, because whatever, there's reasons for that. But the point being that, it's just not like it appears on the surface.
Interesting. Bobby, do you have locations everywhere? You're global, so it must be global. So what locations are you? So I'm assuming Europe, right? MENA? Are you in the MENA regions? What regions are you based?
Yeah, the flap D regions from Frankfurt, London, on through. Some of the key markets throughout APAC, Singapore, obviously Tokyo as well, and throughout, make some additional, and really the huge growth opportunity.
Is Dave Dwayne still with you guys?
I'm sorry, who?
Dave Dwayne?
I'm not familiar with him.
Oh, okay. Anyway, I worked with him at Colt, and when you say those markets,
I know Dave.
He joined NTT. Yeah.
It's a reunion.
Sorry, I know everybody.
Anyway.
So when you're looking at data centers in non-US countries versus US countries, do they have the same issues? Like, are they so to get power, does it take 5 years? Is there anything globally happening that's the same?
Yeah, there's some of the same key issues. I mean, power is a front of line consideration, regardless of the global region. I think, one thing that when we think about, especially throughout the European regions, right? I mean, you kind of have much more strict, energy laws, and when you're thinking about sustainability. So, with the efficiency of different types of equipment and what have you. So it's not even just obtaining the power, it's then, all of the infrastructure equipment that's then required to then, energize, down to the server.
Interesting. Do they have PUE like ranges that you have to stay in? Are they doing anything around penalizing you if you don't in a certain? Are they doing that?
It gets very strict, and their PUE ranges are materially lower. I think about the German markets right now. They certainly walk the walk from a regulatory perspective.
Really
interesting. That's
in many cases, if I'm not mistaken, Bobby, they require heat recovery, participation in a community heat loop to help use energy even in the community more efficiently as a result of the data center being located there.
Certainly.
So there was an article out that Prologis plans on 10 gigawatts of data centers over the next 10 years. That Yeah, next 10 years. Yeah, I guess because it's going to take them that amount of time to get the power. I don't know, but but
The
they're
gig a year. The gig a year. Because
a
we
gig year. Apparently, that's their goal. So it's interesting. That article just came out yesterday. They said they have another like 1.5 gigawatts that are right behind that, but basically they're planning a gig a year. So in order for someone to execute that kind of game plan, they've probably have had this in the works for 20 years. I mean, like, I don't know, what does it take to do a gig a year? Like it's got to be, they've had to be doing this for a while. If it takes 4 to 5 years in order for you to get a data center, I don't understand how they're executing that plan.
Yeah, but my only thought is that they have some inside baseball. Obviously, they being the largest logistics landlord globally, some of those sites they must have already done some groundwork. I think to have some visibility on available power if they kind of repatriate a warehouse or what have you. But just going out and kind of de novo, doesn't feel very realistic.
Yeah, I know, right?
Yeah, I can only reiterate what Bobby just said. I don't interrupt Howie, but I mean, I'm the old guy here or whatever. Gigawatt of data center still sounds like a lot to me. Not that easy to do, and certainly, it's not entirely incumbent upon Prologis to, put that kind of load on the grid, right? It's really their off takers and tenants and so forth. And even that, is a significant proposition to put that much load on, consistently in these projects. It's not always under the developer's control. Let's put it that way.
I'd love to hear your guys' thought because I'm preaching and it has to get there. I fully believe that we have to get to self-generation on site. Obviously, we talk about small modular nuclear. We talk about self-gen. Anything we can do, it doesn't make any sense anymore. And I keep saying it over and over. The data center industry is so slow to adopt new technologies, right? We're 5.9s, we're 5.9 data center, but we're reliant on the power grid that's now getting taxed by these gigawatt data centers that we're putting in. Caruso just announced another gigawatt site in Alberta, Canada. They just partnered with, and I'm doing a gigawatt site and another one in Texas. We got 1.6 gigs there. They're all now gigawatt sites. We were at 100 megawatts. We're at 300 megawatts. This is not sustainable. We can't rely on the grid, the older grid, to rely on an extension cord that runs 500 miles from a nuclear power station. We have to self-generate. So that long-winded question is, what are you guys seeing, and what are you guys focused on self-generation on site?
Yeah, I mean, it's still quite an emerging technology in that sense. It's from a reliability perspective. I mean, still TOPS is the local power utility, and being at their beck and call, right? I mean, certainly starting to explore those alternatives. On the wait and see, I know there are a few more cavalier platforms out there that are putting that into play right now. Hopefully that it does kind of solve itself out and become something scalable from a commercial application. But
do your clients start saying, wait, you're not tied to the grid, we don't want to go in your data center because you're self-generating? Is that could that be a problem for your clients?
Yeah, I think absolutely.
Really?
We're all in the risk game, right? So, and we have very little room for anything other than perfection. At least if something goes awry with the power utility, that's a finger you can point at, and it's like, hey, how do you not go with IBM?
It just terribly well said. I often quote one of my mentors in this business is Peter Gross, if you guys know him, and the quote is, "We are very interested in innovation in the data center business as long as it has a 20-year track record."
Exactly right. Yeah, I heard him say that. Yeah,
and he's again, he's just a friend and mentor, and couldn't be better encapsulated. The thing that everybody is not really focusing on is that interconnection piece that I keep coming back to with the utility. And that's why I do what I do now is, an islanded site is a whole separate problem than a grid connected site, right? And my view is the economics of islanded sites are really, really challenging. It's really hard to map your capital investment in making energy to the ramp rate at which you consume it, particularly with the requirement for redundancy and reliability.
Mhm.
Now, if you want to help make the economics work, you actually need to connect to the grid, and you'll get more reliability out of it, and you'll make the economics work, but it doesn't get you out of interconnection to the grid. And it also puts you in a different type of queue in terms of interconnection to the grid. It's very different to be an injector of energy than it is someone who's withdrawing energy from the grid. There's very different processes for establishing that interconnection. And if it could be worse than it is on the withdrawal side, it is worse on the injection side.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I see it where I that's a valid point, but I would see where if you could do redundant self-generation on site, and now you're injecting back into the grid, but then you're not reliant on, we take out the generators. If we're ESG, we're going for clean data center operations. We're not relying on diesel generators to be our redundant source, but our self-generation on site is our redundancy. I can see that as a business plan for reliability.
Apologies, all. I have to hop, but it was great speaking with you all.
Thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks, Bobby.
Thanks for
Thanks,
being
Bobby.
here.
Nice to meet you. I think what you're saying, Howie, is it's more complicated than it seems.
That's what the data center industry sees it as. I agree, but I see it as a reasonable, solid solution to what we're trying to do. Because when we're going to get to those hot days in the summer, it'll be interesting to see what we look like when we're really taxing that grid.
No question about it. I'm not saying that there's been sadly a lot of neglect on the grid infrastructure. It's coming home to roost. There need to be, sort of safety valves on how to deal with some of this stuff. But the economics are really challenging. That's sort of where I would leave it.
Interesting. Yeah.
So
We'll convince you.
yeah.
I'm for it. I'm doing it. We're doing it. Come
Yeah.
on, David, we're going to make this model. Come on, get on my team.
Yeah, I know. So there's another article talking about how the Washington State governor, I think he should just watch this show, honestly, truly. He'll get all the education he needs on data centers. But no, he has to issue a study around what's the implications of data centers on revenue and jobs. And I thought that there's enough information out there about that, but who knows? But anyway, so we're going to school the Washington State governor on the impact of revenue and jobs.
I think it's in tax basis, as long as you're not abating the taxes for data center development in your area, you're going to be generating 1 to call it 5 million on a 10 megawatt data center, and on a 50 megawatt data center, you're 10 to 50 million, and 100 megawatt hyperscale data center and above, you could be generating 50 to 100 million a year in tax revenue from a data center. So is it a job impact or is it a revenue impact? It's interesting how you look at it. Yeah, that we need to create jobs. In the short term, we have construction, building, great. Right. We got jobs. Long term, hyperscale, we do need to employ a fair amount of people, skilled technicians to operate in a data center.
Yeah, but less than 100, right? Like 50 people, something like that.
It's scale dependent. And scale matters a lot in all of this. There's clearly a push to reduce operating expense. And so that's another thing that drives the, sort of the data center campus growth over an individual site because, if you're spreading your operating expense over, 5 buildings versus 1, right, you're going to get, a better incremental cost basis on your overall operations. But it does employ a bunch more people. And it's not just, people don't think about other aspects of
Right.
data center operation. It's
Right.
not just the guys, whatever, in the data halls, which are good paying jobs. It's all the mechanical and electrical plant maintenance.
Thank
Which
you.
is also a really significant portion of where the money goes in operating expense. And these guys are really smart, and they have to work really hard, and it takes a bunch of them to operate these data centers from a mechanical and electrical standpoint. And those are also good paying jobs.
They're good paying jobs. Yeah.
Yeah, they're good paying jobs, and they're important jobs. And then, sure, you've got, security and, grounds and, all these other kinds of facilities maintenance jobs that are sort of somewhat less so, but in general, significantly better than a lot of the, like, compared to what, right? Compared to the, logistics center that's paying minimum wage. And, so, that's would be kind of, like, that would be kind of my response to in a political sense, is like, compared to what? Like, this is job creation. These are relatively good jobs. Some of them are great jobs, and on a permanent basis, in addition to the high paying construction work.
Is it on the data center side? Is there talk about this has been happening for a while? So I'm an old general contractor, right? We've had labor shortages in the trades for a while. Like, this is not a new phenomenon. Is that a concern on the data center side, or are they just highly specialized or everybody's wanting to be in data center land, so y'all got electricians aplenty? Or is it a concern on that side?
I think there's a lack of labor. We need more labor. We need more even on the operations side. David's point, you don't just wait for a power outage to let a generator start up. You have to run them every week to make sure they work, so that when the power goes out, you've got to have somebody there to load. We call them load bank, to put them under load to make sure they're doing a fake operation, so that don't throw a rod. You have all these services that guys that need to come in and service all these equipment, and there's not enough people to service. And not a lot of guys that are. Everybody's moved away from it's been looked at, frowned upon. It's like, college education versus, blue collar skilled labor. I think that's really coming back, and skilled labor is becoming a well-paid career for a lot of people.
For sure.
I think that's really well said, Howie.
Yeah. I find it so as the data center industry grows, we all expect there's going to be growth, right? We don't think DeepSeek's going to impact much. There's going to be data center needs, right? We have Stargate, so we know we're spending $500 billion. We got that check book.
Maybe
maybe unless Doge kills it, who knows? Doge might kill the $500 billion because they're
SoftBank investment. Okay.
I know, it's funny. Yeah.
I just, I always kind of revert to easy to say, hard to do. It's easy to say I'm going to invest $500 billion. It's not that easy.
No, it's not even that easy. I mean, they think about it. He's got 4 years, right? Basically, he's not going to change the Constitution. So he has 4 years. You couldn't spend $500 billion in 4 years, even if you started today. Like, if you had all the projects lined up, on the data center side, they're not going to get the power in 4 years. Gotta understand.
Well, David, I'd love to hear your input on this, but we're always estimating we're around right now 10 to 11 million per megawatt to build a data center. And if you're a 100 megawatt data center, you're easily over $1 billion for a 100 megawatt data center. What are you still seeing that same cost, or what do you see, David?
So what I would say is that data center design, in the 30 years I've been doing this, I've never seen so much, change or sort of lack of certainty around design.
Yeah.
What we've seen, we're talking about this kind of extraordinary power demand. What we're seeing also is an extraordinary change in the density of the equipment. So when I started doing this, hate to date myself too far, but we were, started out with telecommunications facilities that were built at 50 to 65 watts a square foot. And the first data centers I built, specifically purpose built, were actually in Asia. And we were building at about 120 to 130 watts a square foot, which in those days was like, oh my God, that's super dense, right? 5 years ago, we started building in the most dense, sites, 300 watts a square foot, right? Now, I mean, and the implications for this, for the rest of the plant, I just, can't even begin to touch upon. And then now we're talking about 400 to 1,000 watts a square foot for the technical space inside a data center, because we're seeing so much variation between something like an NVIDIA GPU device or the next generation NVIDIA device versus somebody else's, whatever. There's multiple other iterations of computing devices that may or may not serve a similar purpose or that augment that purpose. And we have to mix these designs we have to make designs that support this mix of equipment densities. So we're seeing just a tremendous amount of flux right now in what do these designs look like a couple years from now? Right. And because it's you need all the chillers and and if you start talking about, you may change in some cases the redundancy aspects of it, but you also are oftentimes changing the reliability and safety, equipment safety aspects of it. So if I'm spending $3 million a rack, right, I cannot have that rack undergo thermal runaway. So while I may not need, tier 4 electrical infrastructure, I might need a new definition of mechanical infrastructure such that if I do have some sort of failure, I can continue to thermally protect that device, from being damaged as a result of some other failure. So again, we're just seeing a whole lot of change go on all at once, and we don't know exactly where it's taking everybody.
Yeah, I don't know if you caught the Uptime Institute, their results they bring out every quarter. They poll 800, 1,000 operators, data center operators. And, I was really interested because we sell these gigawatt sites and we're in that 300, 400, 1,000 watts per square foot, to your point, that we're not seeing in the existing operations or expansion of existing operations anything above that 50 to 100 watts per square foot in most scenarios. And I was really surprised to see that. And the bigger densities we are seeing in the LLM silo storage deployments of larger GPU deployments in data center designs, and that's the newer stuff as we come on. But it's for the most part, there's a little bit of higher density deployment in the data center right now, and it's difficult at best to do a higher density deployment in an older data center that you basically just push all the PDUs into the corner and plug all the servers in, because you don't need 30,000 square feet to run your call it 100 megawatts, and it's really interesting.
It's a very different thermal problem, Howie.
That's a thermal problem. Yeah, to your point, liquid cooled to chip. Do you have the can you adapt this data center for liquid cooled to chip? Because you're using rear door heat exchangers on there, and so we're getting in the weeds, Amy.
Yeah, you're getting in the weeds, but that's okay.
I'm going to give you one more, in the weeds scenario here, and then I'm going to turn into a punchline. I love it. But one of the other big changes we're seeing is and I was just talking about all this thermal stuff. Well, electrically, the stuff has also changed a great deal as well. So, 20 years ago, you could put a high-end server on the bench and measure its power draw, just plugging it in, sitting idle. And then you would run a program on it to exercise every, flop, every MIP you could, the memory, the hard drive. You're just pounding the thing with some test software, and you would see a 20% variation in the power draw, right?
Right.
That's one of the reasons why data centers are considered sort of a base load on the utility infrastructure, is because once you plug everything in and turn it on, it's a very stable load, relatively speaking, and it's a high power factor load. Now, with with this equipment, you're seeing a variation of 300, 400, 500% in the load of the device when you throw work at it versus when it's sitting there idle. And these are very sharp spikes in change, right? So I throw load at this thing, and in milliseconds, it's spiking its power draw, right?
Yeah.
And this too is just a new phenomena for our industry.
Can feel, it's like the heartbeat of a and when you're in a data center, you can feel the transformers surge with power just because they put a load on the system with these GPUs. It's the craziest thing. It's like it's alive. Oops.
Again, design in flux. In flux.
Yeah. Hard to predict.
Yeah, because you don't know who's going to be doing queries at any point in time. And what if you have a run on, I don't know, shoes, Taylor Swift tickets to a concert go on sale or whatever, and then everybody's trying to buy Taylor Swift tickets. Like, who knows what's going to do the demand surges, right? I mean, it could be anything.
Or somebody querying and dumping information off ChatGPT to build a model.
Yeah, exactly, which I do all the time. Yeah, I'm the power problem. It's me because I'm using.
Oh, it's you. Amy did it.
Amy's problem.
Amy did it. Well, that's good.
Amy did it because I do it all the time. Yeah, I'm all those API integrations with all those LLMs. It's all my fault. It's crazy town. So, David, are you going to have to bolt for a second? Are you going to have to hang out with us?
I can hang on a few more minutes, but I really do have another thing I got to do.
Oh, that's fine. Well, then why don't you go ahead and tell everybody how to get a hold of you, should they want to,
So probably the easiest way to reach me is at my email address. It's david@krnldc.com.
Awesome.
It's Kernel Data Centers, and that's my gig.
Awesome. Well, thanks. Yeah, you can hop off if you want. Thanks for coming.
Pleasure. Thank you.
All right.
David, that was great. Thanks.
Thank you.
Let me know if I can help again. Thanks.
All right, that'd be great. Thanks for
Always.
coming. So, Howie, when we have the next show, well, a couple of announcements before we take off. We have our data center sustainability survey, which is at the proptechcouncil.com. So if you're in the data center industry, we'd love to get your thoughts on the sustainability survey. And what are the next couple of big data center conferences that are happening? There's Data Center World, which is in April, but is anything else major?
We got Metro Connect coming up in Miami, the 24th and the 26th. And that's the major one coming up. I hope to see some people there. I'd love to, if whoever you're watching this, if you want to hear about something and we can bring somebody on, tell us, because we'd love to kind of talk to what people want to hear. We're talking about a lot of news, what's going on, but there's so many great people in this industry. They're so smart, and I really find that I've been immersing myself in the network side of things. And to Amy's point, the light and fiber expansion of that. But I'd love to hear more and talk to more people about network. But I'd love to hear what people are wanting to hear so that we can target that, because there's so many great things going on here.
Yeah. Exactly. And if people do want to do that, my email is apolvido, my last name, at facilimax.com. So just take off the MY off of my name, put those things together at facilimax.com, and you got my email address. So reach out. It would be awesome. And I think we're going to close out the show. So anyway, how can people get a hold of you, Howie?
Howard.Berry, Berry at avesonyoung.com. And call us with the real estate needs. Call us when the data center guy's knocking on your door about your land.
Exactly.
We'll help you out.
Your door and says, hey, would you sell us your thing? Because we want to put a data center here. You should call Howie.
So many guys. I love it.
I
love it. It's so much fun, right? It's so much fun right now, Amy. This is a blast.
I bet it is. Well, this has been a fun show. Thanks everybody for watching. We'll see you next
Thanks, guys.
week.